the Supreme Court is looking at Biden's giveaway to people who own debt.
Giveaway is your term, not my term.
Well, they have college debt. Loan, yeah. Okay, and we're going to give them money.
We're going to forgive debt.
Well, we're arguing about the same thing, but there was no argument. We're giving the money away. Okay, so I just want to read you this. And again, this is against why people sometimes, I think, question some of what you're saying. This is a survey, student loan forgiveness recipients. 73% of applicants say they are likely to spend their extra money on non-essential, including vacations, smartphone, drugs, and alcohol. They admitted that to the pollster.
Who is this pollster?
NBC News. 52% they are very likely to buy new clothing. 46% they would use the money for vacation and eat out at restaurants. This is why people have a thing about, I would never call it free money. Oh, I guess I just did, but.
Well, let me respond to that in two ways, Bill. You talk about giveaways. Under Trump, the Congress voted for $1 trillion in tax breaks for the richest people in this country and the largest corporations. That's a giveaway. We just increased military spending with very little discussion, I don't know if you know this, by $80 billion. Military industrial complex.
Including the Democrats.
Pardon me?
The Democrats vote for it too.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely right. All right.
But that's socialism, the military. That's crony socialism.
Well, that's
right?
Crony capitalism.
But the military isn't capitalism. That's the government.
No, but it's who owns the military industrial complexes. All right, but anyhow.
Right.
All right. So when you talk about giveaways, you have major corporations in this country that make billions in profit, don't pay a nickel in taxes. Billionaires have an effective tax rate lower than that of a truck driver or a nurse. You have a generation, you talk about this younger generation right now. I got around the country and I talked to a lot of people. You know, I don't know anything about that poll, but I can tell you, I've talked to nurses who are working their asses off, doing the right thing. They leave school $70,000 in that. They can't afford now to get married and have children. They can't afford the housing that they desperately need. So the truth is, you got a generation that, everything being equal, the younger generation will have a lower standard of living than their parents. You and I, and I'm a little older than you, can remember 50 years ago, what did it cost to go to the University of California? Remember?
$50,
yeah,
500.
Virtually free. City University of New York,
right.
Virtually free. And right now, these young people are leaving school deeply in debt. They're struggling economically. They deserve a break.
This is Bernie sparring with Bill Maher, and there's a lot to dive into, but nothing more egregious than this point right here. Maher says that if this student loan debt is forgiven, that people would, and I hope you're sitting down for this, use money on restaurants and vacations. And I know I speak for all of you when I say, God forbid. God forbid someone had disposable income and used it on something that would bring about joy. God forbid people aren't in a perpetual state of penance and misery, and that we don't use every cent we have paying insurance companies and medical bills. Imagine having the audacity to spend money on something enjoyable like clothing. Here's the thing, something tells me that Bill allows himself to live with some dignity, and yet this guy goes on TV and brings up a poll that seeks to scold the millions of Americans who are buried under predatory student loan debt with criminally high interest rates for the crime of wanting to go to a restaurant? And Maher is supposed to be some man of the people? Give me a fucking break. And of course, pointing to this poll where some respondents commit the sin of saying that they might go out and eat a burger at a restaurant is simply a distraction from a bigger problem in society, wherein we have entire generations of young people who can't afford to live, who aren't having kids because they can't afford them, who aren't buying homes because they can't afford them, who are working multiple jobs because they can't afford to live on one. All problems, by the way, that Bill Maher's generation didn't have to contend with, and which this multi-millionaire television host certainly doesn't seem capable of appreciating right now. So you can wrap desperately needed student loan relief in coded language about it being free cash, but if you don't recognize the glaring problem posed by income inequality in this country and a disappearing middle class, then your head is in the sand. Another egregious point here, Maher tries to frame our glut of tax dollars going to the military as socialism. He says the military isn't capitalism, that's the government. Does Bill Maher not know what the military-industrial complex is? Does he think that's some giveaway to the people people? Does this dude think that a $25 billion B-21 stealth bomber is some redistribution of wealth? Because if so, we've got some very different concepts of socialism. And look, I am pro-military, of course I understand the importance of defense, but let's not pretend that anyone views the hundreds of billions of dollars going to a bloated military defense contract as anything other than crony capitalism and government waste. And again, if Bill Maher is supposed to be the populist here, I'm not seeing it. Now, on the broader concept of loan forgiveness, first of all, we live in a society where when big businesses need a bailout, they get one. And no one turns around and balks at the fact that over and over and over, corporations and CEOs that allow their companies to fail are then cradled in the soft embrace of a taxpayer bailout to the tune of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And yet, when regular people are buried under predatory loans that prevent them from succeeding, we defer right back to the whole rugged individualism rhetoric, right back to the pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Why is it okay for the government to step in and help a failed corporation that operates within a society, but not individual people who compose that society? If you're going to rail against bailouts, then you don't get to turn around and apologize for corporations and banks and auto manufacturers that benefit from the exact same thing. Now, of course, Maher is repeating the Republicans' argument here about loan forgiveness being a giveaway. But on that point, what I find especially ironic is that if Republicans are suddenly so concerned about giveaways to the rich, you might consider asking them why they all voted for Trump's 2017 tax cut, which overwhelmingly benefited millionaires and billionaires in this country. Weird how none of them were worried about giveaways to the rich. And more recently, if Republicans were worried about helping out the working poor, why did they vote against capping insulin at $35 a month? Why did they vote against the Inflation Reduction Act, which would cap seniors' out-of-pocket healthcare costs for prescription drugs at $2,000 a year? Or that would actually make billion-dollar corporations pay a minimum of 15% in taxes, or that would fund the IRS so that wealthy tax cheats wouldn't get away without paying their taxes. It's always so interesting to hear Republicans grandstand about helping the little guy when quite literally every single policy position they hold is to screw over the little guy while heaping favor onto millionaires and billionaires. And by the way, to further expose just how prevalent of a problem student loan debt is, recognize that more than 45 million Americans collectively owe over $1.7 trillion in student debt. That's almost 9% of the GDP, all tied up in useless interest payments as opposed to going to the actual economy. And it's not just the amount, it's also a racial justice issue. While only 11% of white men and 17% of white women have student loan debt, 15% of black men and 31% of black women have student loan debt. And black borrowers owe an average of $25,000 more than their white counterparts. Student loan forgiveness would play a massive role in restoring some semblance of racial justice that has disproportionately impacted communities of color in this country spanning generations. And finally, for those out there who say, well, I paid off my loans, so why should other people have their loans forgiven? Here's the thing. We all benefit from living in a society where millions of people are not saddled with crippling debt. Think about what it'll mean if millions of people who'd been giving all of their money to loan sharks can instead use that money at the aforementioned restaurants, at clothing stores, at small businesses, on vacations in their communities. That benefits everyone. Republicans want you to think that other people living with dignity somehow means that your quality of life gets worse. That is dead wrong. Living with dignity is not a zero-sum game. It is the bare minimum of what we should strive for in the richest, most prosperous country in history. Think too about the potential that's lost when people are saddled with debt. It's not just about where people are able to spend their money now, it's about the opportunities that are lost. If you're dealing with crushing debt, you are less likely to start a small business, less likely to own a home, less likely to have kids. If we want people in this country to reach their true potential and contribute to a prosperous society, then the idea that all of their money should be siphoned off to loan sharks is completely antithetical to that. Here's the thing, when more people prosper in this country, we all prosper. We should want money to stay in our communities, in our small businesses, among our neighbors and friends and families. That is how we rebuild the middle class that's been decimated by 40 years of Republican-led trickle-down economics and an explosion of wealth inequality in this country. It didn't work then, and it continues not to work now. So conservatives, and yes, even their enablers, will try to fearmonger. They'll work relentlessly to pit you against other Americans, but people seeking a little debt relief aren't the enemy. The enemy is predatory lenders sucking millions upon millions of dollars out of the middle class and the lower class. Those are the people who we should be focusing our disgust at, the exact people who Bill Maher is running cover for in this scenario right here. Before you go, a quick announcement. I've started a Spanish YouTube channel. Democrats desperately need to be able to appeal to Spanish-speaking audiences, so this is me doing my part. To help that channel get going in the algorithm so that we can finally start spreading our progressive message and breaking the conservative stranglehold on Spanish-speaking media, please subscribe and watch a few videos. The link to that channel, called Brian Tyler Cohen Espanol, is right here on this screen. And of course, to see more of my content in English, make sure to subscribe to this channel as well. The link is also right here on this screen. Thanks so much for watching.